in New York City. We've been open for 2 weeks, so you guys are the inaugural event. We offer a way to move seamlessly between the everyday and the eternal through the study of Eros, an essential energy force that arises from our desire for connection with ourselves, others, and the world around us. You will find a very nice little card on your seat that has a QR code where you can find out lots more information about One Taste and the One Taste Center, and you can also find out more about altered states. Ira has been kind enough to put together this amazing program. Leah is the first speaker in our series. There will be another talk on November 19th. And we also have a wonderful event called Women Over Dinner here, October 25th, which you can find information about on the resources that we left you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ira and Leah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you all for coming. It's really nice to see this room filled with like this kind of energy, and my friend Leah. This series was originally going to be a conference that we were planning on the land, which is the Eros Monastery in Northern California and Mendocino County, but unfortunately government overreach got in the way, and we put that on hold, and we've taken Altered States and made it a series, and it was originally going to be kind of starring Leah in many ways, because her work has always been about consciousness and the space between consciousness and creativity. So having you inaugurate this series, which is designed to look at a lot of modalities of consciousness expansion, whether it's long-term meditation, psychedelics, just whatever the practice is that one brings, we're going to try to bring as many people in to discuss how to get to the mystical state, which is where healing and transformation begins. And for different people, it's different ways of doing it. And when I met you, I had no idea, I mean, I remember the night I met you and David. You didn't have a child then, but you had a greyhound rescue named London, who was like this tall and was the sweetest animal in the world. And I saw a performance of yours not that long after at Isabella Rossellini's farm, Mama Farm, which was the result of a vow of silence for 40 days.
Yes.
And you were doing deep meditation prior also. I think you were doing like, no caves.
No
No
caves
caves.
that time.
Right.
Yes, meditation as a preparatory modality is
For
very
that.
Yes, very much central to all of my performance work.
And we're going to do a little show of your work, a little précis. Leah is one of the more interesting people in the performance art world, in that her academic background combined with her spiritual interests has made a person whose exploration of everything from neuroscience to spirituality has been deep and lifelong, and we can get to the early start a little bit later. So why don't we take a look at this, and maybe you'll tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, I would love
Right.
to. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to inaugurate this incredible series in this gorgeous space. Yes, so I'll jump right in. Art for me is really not a modality for self-expression. It's more of a modality for the exploration of the nature of reality. And I like to think of art on the same footing as spirituality and science. So I've always found myself to be adjacent as an artist with scientists and spiritual people, spiritual seekers. And I guess you could say what I'm really interested in is this phenomenon of synthesis. So how do we harness this phenomenon of creativity, of divine inspiration, of the artistic consciousness to experience a synthesized perception of ultimate reality? And this is really what I'm after with my art practice. When I first started my journey as a young artist, I studied at Goldsmiths College And I did my PhD thesis on the topic of Henri Bergson's cinematographic perceptual theory. And in a nutshell, what Bergson was doing as an evolutionary philosopher at the beginning of the 20th century was really critiquing the mechanism that was befuddling a lot of philosophers and scientists of his generation. He really wanted to clarify this idea around perceiving reality as something that can really go in one of two ways. It can be something that is the fragmented product of what he referred to as a cinematographic perceptual modality, wherein you basically are viewing reality through the egoistic lens in discrete individual parts, objects, persons, etc. The alternative to that, of course, is this more synthesized reality, which he called the organismic perceptual reality. And for me, this was very, very interesting because Bergson really put his finger he put his finger on something very important for his time. He intuited rather prophetically some of the philosophical splinters in the modernist project, which would come to fruition in late modernity as a way of viewing reality and a way of viewing ourselves through the lens of mechanism and technology. And I think we're all experiencing the fruit of that splinter in our daily life now, as we look at technology as the analog, rather than asserting the ultimate organismic analog that is the human being. And so my thesis really looked at how we overcome this problem. And what I really worked on was this concept of the intelligence of sensation, which casts, and I think this is why it's so important and such an honor for me to be here tonight, it casts this work of philosophy and wisdom seeking and wisdom keeping in the embodied experience, in the direct experience of the sensate organism, as opposed to the mentalism of pure conceptualization. And so, part of my artistic lineage will take it back to those great explorers of the inner world. These are the cave paintings of Lascaux in France, made by shamanic explorers of direct experience of mystical ecstasy. Here we have Hildegard von Bingen, the great polymath of the 12th century, also the mother of German botany, really Western botany, a great visionary composer who had never studied music, but by the power of the Holy Spirit was given the knowledge of musical composition, as well as these incredible visions that she managed to translate in her visual artwork. And this is called God, the Cosmos, and Humanity. Here we have Hilma af Klint, the mother of abstraction, really the person who invented modern abstraction as we know it. She preceded Kandinsky, as we know from Guggenheim's wonderful retrospective a few years ago here in New York, which really helped us refigure the whole history of abstraction. And here you have a composition, what a human being is. You can literally see she is channeling the Kundalini energy and showing this spiral motion of the vital life force coursing through the human being, straight through the heart, the perceptual organ of the heart, up through the cosmic egg to open the 1,000-petaled lotus into the great cosmos. It's a map of enlightenment. And she gave this to us in 1910. And then shortly thereafter, in 1913, we have Wassily Kandinsky. There are so many explorers of the inner world. If you're ever looking for me, you can probably find me at the Neue Gallery, weeping in front of a Kandinsky painting. So for me, as an artist, these are my mothers and fathers, my brothers and sisters, those who I look up to. And really, in a nutshell, they were channeling that mystical ecstasy of the direct experience and finding ways to sift through that interior space of one's own cave to create representations, anchor points that would help lead the way for future humans who are on the same exploration. So in this journey, I'll take you through a couple of my works, 4 to be exact, if that's okay, and let me know if you want to cut me off. I know we have a lot to cover. So in that kind of reference to Henri Bergson and his obsession with the technology of his age, the photograph, and this idea of the cinematographic way of perceiving. This thought really influenced and has influenced a lot of my thinking and my approach to performance work. For my first major work was called Luminous Objects. And in this work, it started in 2013 and it's gone to the present day. It's a durational performance piece. This is a piece in which I meditate for extended durations of time and really become a wide field Hubble telescope into superconsciousness. So I will meditate, enter a very deeply meditative state in which I experience all kinds of phenomena. It could range from having mystical visions, visionary experiences, to complete ecstatic anesthetization in a bliss state. So it really extends between these two poles. But the primary kind of meat of this performance is a practice that I've honed over the past, I suppose, 11 years now, of reporting on these visionary experiences in real time. So I've trained myself to be able to be dictated to as these visionary experiences occur in the style of a reporter. And that takes me to the next body of work that then began in 2014 and is something that has extended to the very present day. It's a very intriguing, it doesn't really fit within a category of art. It's an embodied artwork, but it's also scholarly research. I call it On the Science of Mystical Vision. And what this piece really explores is it puts this process that I honed through that Luminous Objects performance underneath the microscope of the neuroscience model. And this is a body of work that I've been collaborating with world-class neuroscientists at Goldsmiths College and Queen Mary at the University of London for 10 years now. We have been very privileged to have a very fruitful collaboration wherein we bring together the artistic paradigm of the imagination and the scientific paradigm of the scientific method, and we expand both vessels to hold a little more of the imagination. And in so doing, what we've done is we've explored this notion of a scientific method that incorporates subjectivity and direct experience. And so I have participated in this performance in the capacity as the director of the research and the designer of the research, but also the sole subject. And it's a very interesting process when you fashion scientific rigor. You can either fashion it through multiple subjects over a short period of time, or a single subject over a very long period of time. And so we've taken that latter approach to explore the neurobiology of mystical vision. And what I find so exciting about this work particularly is, and what has really been our goal, is how do we take mystical experience and sort of elevate it above this category of personal, romantic, private experience and apply scientific rigor to it so that we can explore its interface with objective reality, right? Because this is where we start to crystallize what's happening in not just the brain, but in the mind and in the soul. So what's been very exciting about this work is we've recreated the experience of meditating in a cave for hours and hours on end, and we've used the EEG to very rigorously record everything that is happening in real time as I'm reporting on what I'm experiencing in the visionary visual field. What we found is the heightened visual experience that is correlated with mystical ecstasy is positively correlated with the gamma wave brainwave signature. And I think for a long time, it was considered to be the dark matter of neuroscience. A lot of people, even a lot of scientists, would dismiss gamma as something that was useless. Now it's considered the dark matter of neuroscience. So this has been a very exciting project because not only have we been able to locate the neurobiological signature of high states of visionary mystical ecstasy, but we have also managed to prove, and this is one of the original contributions of the research, we've managed to prove that the visionary experience creates a neurobiological signature, which is correlated, which basically is the same type of signature that is correlated with direct experience of visual perception in reality, and not the imagination. And this is our anchor, this is our link between mystical vision and objective reality. So this is very new research and it's developing, but this for me was a very exciting discovery, and it's still in the process of being made. Okay, and then I wanted to show you just a couple of works here where I'm exploring biofeedback technologies to, in a way, fashion consciousness in real time, not only in myself, but also in the audience, to enter into brainwave activities that could possibly connect the participants to a deepened state of consciousness. And I want to be very clear because it's very important to distinguish what's happening in the brain from what's happening in that kind of larger global sense of human experience. But within this piece, I was really excited to draw upon Richard Feynman's wonderful discovery in the 1940s of being able to entrain the brain with stroboscopic light. And so this really, for me, this is a piece called Tumult. And a lot of people ran out of this installation when it premiered in London because it really evoked a visceral response. But essentially what it did was, it was a technology that connected my brainwave activity that was being read by an EEG to a strobe light, and used the frequency of the strobe then to entrain the audience to my same brainwave state. And so it was like this very interesting exercise in communion and working with light itself as the original Soma. There are so many versions of Soma in the world, right? We know we have the plant medicines. We know, like, the ancient tantrikas have the bodily fluids. There are so many conduits into enlightened states of awareness. But in my humble opinion, and this is more of maybe a suspicion than an opinion, I believe light must be the original version of Soma. I think light, because light is also what the plants collect, light is what the body collects, and then transitions into these, like, purified substances. So working within this idea of Soma and spiritual awakening, I'm really working with light as this incredible tool for evoking illumination. And then finally, I just wanted to share this work too. This was more recent work, and this is the work that Ira referred to, where we really crystallized our wonderful connection. This was a performance that I was commissioned to create by Isabella Rossellini at her wonderful farm in Long Island. And this was really a work that I explored this idea of meditation with the eyes. And I wanted to bring forth some of these visionary experiences that I've had in my own private sanctuary of my mind, in that sort of original sense of sight, into that secondary sense of sight where we start to perceive things in the outside world. And so this was a dance performance that I designed, and I performed it with 2 other incredible dancers with light at sunset. And we worked with this phenomenon called the retinal afterimage. And it literally, as a sort of performance, a visual performance, it invited the audience to meditate on the light. And for a moment of 5 minutes, such an ephemeral sort of phenomenon that you can work with because of the light of the setting sun, the eyes can track light over that continuum, that organismic, to reference Bergson's wonderful theories, that organismic way of perceiving reality, as opposed to the cinematographic, fragmented, fractured, egoistic way of perceiving. And so this was a lovely performance, and we had so much fun doing it. And it was presented on a farm in nature. And yes, I just loved this performance so much. It was fun. The modality that we used to kind of generate the movement was a meditative practice called contemplative walking that my teachers in the Himalayas taught me at Swami Rama's wonderful Sadhaka Grama in Rishikesh. Oh, and maybe I threw in one last piece too. Oh my gosh. Okay, why not? And then we are moving on. I'm so sorry. I'm just talking. So then finally, I just wanted to share this little biofeedback environment embodied art piece. I really love this piece too, because I kind of built on this idea of light as Soma, and then working with, I developed this very cool biofeedback technology that basically it correlated the frequencies of brainwaves, of sound, and light in a single experience. And it was presented in a nightclub environment in Las Vegas, which was super fun. It was called the Octave of Visible Light, a meditation nightclub. And it was a really subversive thing to show in Las Vegas, because it really invited people to utilize the currency of their attention to be present, and to, for a moment, to enter into that ultimate reality in this, this playground of the ego. So it's really, we had a lot of fun. But what it really did was work with this process of aligning these various frequencies of perception to create just to generate the field where it would be possible to experience a little view into that ultimate reality within yourself, that sense of alignment with total presence. So those of you who are meditators in this room, like everybody, right? There is that wonderful Tibetan practice of aligning the mind and the attention with the breath. And this is one of the most powerful practices, right? I mean, we know it's like one of the great keys to the kingdom of heaven. If we can align our breath with our attention, then we are suddenly inhabiting the eternal now. This is wonderful. So what I wanted to do was kind of generate this phenomenon with light and sound in a nightclub environment, which was really, really wild, but it was well received. I worked with, I think, over 4,500 individual visitors to this installation. So I will leave it at this, I think. Okay, thank God it's over. Yeah, I will pass it over to Ira.
Well, I'm going to pass it right back to you. I mean, this was great. To go back to the farm soon, like right after I met you, I remember this piece very well. And I remember sitting there and kind of watching the three of you in white and watching this contemplative walking. And then you're swinging these LED light strips, which were like rainbow. And I'm sitting there like, and it's all aesthetics for me, and think, I don't get it. Why isn't it white? And at some point I had the courage to ask, and you explained what this was all about, that I mean, I'm kind of looking and thinking, wait, there's something off here. And your study, it got you to that spectrum of light. Remind me, this is like what we see, like, talk to me about light.
Light, yes. Well, I think because I've worked so much with, it's light for me as a kind of mystical experience began when I was a child, when I was 5.
When you were a whirling dervish in the attic of the house.
Yes.
On Sundays when everyone was like discussing theology.
Yeah,
right.
something like that. Yeah.
Right.
I just spontaneously practiced the dervish when I was a child. I started at 5, and it became a ritual for me that connected me to that visionary experience that then became, such a central aspect of my creative
But you did it in the
practice.
dark. Didn't you black out the windows in the attic as a child?
Yes.
When you were spinning, and so, which I'm curious about, but I do want to get back to the colors.
Yes.
But why did you black out the windows or did light evolve for you into the space and you understood the importance of light? I'm kind of curious about going from the dark to the light as a kid.
Yeah, I think intuitively I've always known, without a kind of conceptual understanding, that that light, in its deepest sense and truth, is best explored in the dark, and that's the paradox.
Beautiful. So light and color.
Yes.
Again, I'm watching this procession of dancers at dusk in white, and I'm expecting the light around them to be white because that's what I just think it should be. But it wasn't, and it wasn't white because of how our brains work. I remember you explaining to me why the colors in that LED strip were what they were, and that being fascinating.
The colors were actually programmed into the strips, but so what you were seeing was actually pre-programmed. We pre-programmed the colors to evoke different emotions.
Right.
But that form that you were perceiving as you watched the performance, you weren't just seeing a strip of light, you were seeing these geometric forms, arches, and that is something that was a product of the retinal afterimage. That is something that happens within the eye. And this is the retinal afterimage is kind of like a bridge between first vision, like the original vision that takes place within the mind, and second vision, we could say, the vision of perceiving something in the world outside of ourselves, because it marries motion together and different discrete moments together into one cohesive form. And it does so actually within the mind. The mind puts it together. And so it gives you a little vision or a little clue of what the mind is always doing. So rather than, in a way, it shows us that the mind is the orchestrator of what we see, and it's not the other way around.
Right. So you titled this talk, The Architecture of Consciousness, which I found fascinating because the whole idea of consciousness having an architecture, the Tibetans are very strict. There is something about it, but it felt very clinical. And that space between neuroscience and consciousness is this gap that you're bridging with art. So what came first? The art, the neuroscience, how did this all come together, and when did it all come together? Because I know there was a lot of study, but then suddenly you're kind of working with the scientists and you're telling them, or they're telling you, or someone else is telling you.
This was very interesting. It was in 2013, and I still work in this way to this day. If I need artistic direction, I'm not an artist who works like a factory. I don't create unless I receive divine inspiration, and that is part of the discipline for me. So I can go through periods of time where I'm focusing on contemplative practice, in order to receive that crystalline form of inspiration. And during that time in 2013, I was having this incredible renaissance within myself of experiencing these heightened visionary experiences in these superconscious states. And as a prayer, in a state of meditation, I simply asked, the divine one, right, what do I do with this? Like, this is a gift. What would you have me do with this? And it was a very clear message I received. Have you contacted the neuroscientists? Right. And I was like, well, where do I begin with that? Because oftentimes artists are kind of like ambassadors. We get to be these, we get to kind of, we're very blessed because we get to go into all kinds of different worlds.
Right. NASA will send you somewhere.
Exactly, with no expertise. Right. But I think that it's the childlikeness of the artist, and the artist as a space holder for the soul's curiosity when it dares to empty itself of what it thinks it needs to do, who it thinks it is, and what it thinks it knows. The artist can be a vessel for holding many, many divine things when he enters into that process of kenosis, of self-emptying. And for me, this is just thrilling because it's like, I don't want to create art that is illustrating something that I've preconceived. I'm not interested in knowing or expressing what I think I know. I really want art to be a revelation. When I get created, I too want to be in awe. So this, for me, it's a very personal experience. And so I experienced this commanding inspiration. Have you checked with the neuroscientists? And I said, no.
And that's what got you to Goldsmiths? No, you studied.
And then I said, well, where should I go? Right. Where should I go for these neuroscientists? My goodness, have you checked Goldsmiths? And of course I hadn't, because I don't know how you guys feel about your alma maters, but sometimes you just want out and you want to leave, right? And I love Goldsmiths, but I was definitely ready, especially after a PhD, I was ready to, cut loose. But it took me back to the psychology department, where this incredible world-class team of neuroscientists who specialize in the neuroscience of creativity were based in doing this work. And I proposed a research program to them. I said, this is totally wild. You know, how adventurous are you guys? I also reached out to my friends at Oxford. They rejected it. They were very conservative. But the neuroscientists at Goldsmiths were incredibly adventuresome. And I think
long before the clinical trials here were taking place with psilocybin, right? I mean, this predates all the Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it does.
yeah.
And what we were also working with was organic consciousness. Yeah,
Right.
in that sense. So it's very interesting. I tend to think of, you know, to reference the title of the series, Altered States, I tend to make a distinction between altered states and illuminated states. And I think it's very important to do so. And really what I'm after is more the illumination.
Yeah.
Although there is, again, like we've talked about this before, altered states, if seen through the lens of Soma as spiritual awakening, has a wonderful utility.
Right.
Wonderful utility.
And well, yeah, I mean, I think I told you when I went to see Meredith Monk,
Yeah.
I was completely transformed, and it was just, you know, the vibrational thing that was going on in the room, and I didn't take anything.
Yeah.
So right, but the architecture of consciousness, you're tracking something.
Yes.
You're tracking something that's hard for most of us to understand, because it's the space between creativity, which is ephemeral for most of us, you know, and then this very hard thing called neuroscience. And there seems to be room in there for interpretation. Would that be, I mean, there is a structure that the brain has, and there are things that are created in terms of frequencies and ways. But then the individual has the ability to, I mean, you're telling it, and this is what I'm trying to get at, like, not everyone can empty out so easily. You know, I mean, there are so many people who are pre-programmed that the art they produce is born of trauma, or it's born of history, or it's born of a political response. But you're going into a space that's really pure, which to me is more radical than responding to, you know, what's going on in the world, because that's predictable. But how does one get there? You know, that's the thing, because I've always found, like, you've managed to go into spaces that are harder. It's discipline, I suppose. I mean, I think you're.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the willingness to be the fool.
Okay.
I mean that. And knowing that you're not vying for the approval of the philosophical materialist model, and that rejection is nearly guaranteed. So you get to be the fool, and you get to be the outsider in that sense. How does one get there? I mean, there's a place for discipline, for sure. But after a certain point, for me anyway, what I've learned is it's not about discipline at all. And it goes right back to why we're in this space tonight. It's about falling madly in love with the Creator and submitting yourself to the divine Eros. You know, this is part and parcel of deep states of superconsciousness, spiritual illumination, creative inspiration, you know, and all the rest of it, you know, it could keep going and going. It's the love, and it's the surrender. So all of this talk of self-emptying, you know, it's a precursor to the filling.
So you've just emptied your house.
Yeah.
You've emptied a lot. You followed the Jaguar. Is that, I mean, you had a desire to really devote yourself to your practice, and you are doing that now. So you're saying goodbye to us here
Yeah.
in New York, and going into a new space.
Yeah.
Tell us what you want, or do you not even know? Does it just come when you go into the jungle with your family and into a new space in the Yucatan? What's next for you? Does artistic practice continue, or is the artistic practice not even kind of there anymore because it becomes kind of divine practice? Or
I mean, I do think, like, sacred surrender is the creative vanguard. So, like, there's no leaving that behind. And I do think, and I want to say this for every artist in the room, like, you are not defined by what you do or your life. You define it all, and everything that you touch is art. So I'm going into this, I'm moving to the jungle, basically, very soon. Another divine inspiration that came to me, and it's been a journey to get there, self-emptying journey, but my primary vocation now is to listen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I remember you handing me these volumes of these books that when you were the plants were talking to you, and there was an orchid. I remember that,
Yes.
And that you've really been listening. And I remember when you were in St. Francis of Assisi's cave.
Yes.
The Song of the Water.
Yes.
Came to you, and tell me about the listening.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. That gives us an opportunity to kind of pad out the background. So with a lot of everything I create is the product, in a sense, of the outcome or the child of this devotional contemplative practice. And I've spent a lot of time in durational contemplative practice, whether it's fasting for 90 days. I did that once. I've spent a lot of time in caves for 40 days at a time, spending a lot of time in sensory deprivation situations, really exploring, in a way, that Bergsonian organismic, vehicle of the human body and organism as this, multi-dimensional spaceship. That's what the body is. It's, I think, like, within that context of working with the body as this vehicle for the sacred, that can be, like, submitted to devotional practice in a number of ways to open up the aperture of the reality that we're able to experience. Because this is also, like, a very important core assumption of the spiritual life, that ultimate reality is here now, and I'm just paraphrasing the Christ and, like, other great teachers along the way, but, like, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, right? And so it's very important to understand that our perception is the aperture of our perception, to go back to the photographic analogy, which has been so strong for me, is closed. And the question is, how do we enlarge that? And spiritual discipline is very useful for enlarging that aperture, so more of reality can enter us.
Right. I'm going to ask one more question. The intelligence of sensation was the phrase you used to talk about the body and the sensual, and there's this space, the sacred space of sensuality. There are many terms. You're also kind of in a space where women are taking it back. It feels like the divine feminine is something that, was kind of a woo-woo term that is now no longer like that. That's actually an evolutionary term. And I'm curious to just get to issues of the sacred and the sensual in a culture that separates the two, and it really parses. Sensuality becomes sexuality. Sexuality becomes evil. Yeah. God doesn't have sex. Nobody no God-like people don't, So talk to me about this split place we live, and where you see all of this kind of, I would imagine, healing people.
So interesting. Thank you for this massive question.
Well, you can take any part of it you want.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
the feast. You know, I think ever since humanity moved away from the spiritual practice that you see on things like the caves of Lascaux, the walls of Lascaux, spiritual practices of direct experience. And of course, there are, you know, incredible indigenous and shamanic cultures that have kept that tradition alive, thank goodness. Like the lifeline has somehow miraculously been preserved over the millennia. But I think ever since there was the departure from the mother, the great mother, and an acknowledgement of not only her, but all that is implied by her presence. Mother, mater, matter, embodiment, sexuality, the sacramental nature of ecstasy. And the list goes on and on and on. There's a whole chain reaction that was created by that separation. And so it's interesting, as someone who has, you know, I've interfaced with so many different worlds within spirituality, and mystical Christianity has certainly played a massive role for me, you know. And because I've inhabited that world of having a relationship to the Christ, there has been within me a great sorrow for how the importance of doctrine and mentalism has subverted the potency of original, direct religious experience.
Right.
Because
the texts don't represent what was actually passed down.
It's become idolatrous.
Yeah.
And it has the same, it bears the same cinematographic, you know, it bears the same signature of the simulacrum that you see throughout various modes of egoistic conceptualization. And it, you know, the good news is it's not eternal. It's a temporary construct. And I think we're living in a very interesting moment when that which is eternal is bubbling up. It's undeniable. It's in the stone, it's in the leaves, it's in the cosmos. You know, the symphony of creation is always singing, and it's actually singing very loudly right now. I think we all can agree. And so it can't be denied anymore. And we are being invited to remember that we are participants in this. And a lot of that does, you know, come through the loving channel of the mother, who has been holding space for this moment of our awakening collectively. So that would be, I mean, it's a big question.
Beautifully said.
But
thank you. We're going to open this up to the people in the room. Hello, there's a hand right here. Do you want to ask something of Leah?
So when you were talking about the strobing light and the different brain waves, it sounded, and with the EEG, it kind of sounded like, to me at least, the basis of an epilepsy study.
yeah,
So because strobing light will cause them to start to basically go into a seizure. And thinking about how the past was also defined, that epileptics were also defined as, sometimes based on culture, as shamans or touched by spirits. And with this, with hard science, I have a hard science background too, it seems that by trying to define or kind of find the basis, that we kind of lose maybe the spiritual touch of what science is trying to explain. And with that art piece that you were doing, you were trying to do like more of a contained version of almost like eliciting almost like a response in that capacity.
I really appreciate the question so much, because the last thing I would ever want to support is scientific reductionism. It's something I've really been careful to avoid. And in fact, I think this whole project, in a sense, like is there to dismantle it whilst also tangoing with science. My father's a geneticist, so I grew up in the world of hard science, like seeing that whole kind of rigorous structure. So I really I feel you, and I'm sympathetic to that whole world. I think one of the interesting outcomes of the neuroscience research was discovering that in a very high visionary state, we were able to record high amplitude gamma activity that was 7 times that of the resting state. It's just so incredible. And this is precisely the gamma activity that is usually correlated to epileptic seizures. So when, for example, me as like the research subject, as I'm in these states recording these visions, my brain is anyway producing the same activity that someone with a seizure would be experiencing. So it's very, very interesting, like how ecstasy, in a sense, can paralyze us, but also like set us free, and how there's a lot of mystery in that. This question of like how much of this divine stuff can we hold? Like to go back to the beautiful the Christian analogy of like, you don't put like new wine in old wineskins. You put new wine in new wineskins. And this is the thing, like you put new consciousness in a new vessel. And so like goes back to what Ira was asking about, like how do we fashion, through contemplative practice and discipline, something that can hold this high amplitude of divine light so that we don't die. You know what I mean? Because it really goes to that, the agony and the ecstasy, like the love and the death, like they are so close to each other, like a veil away in some ways. Does that answer your question, or sort of? I'm happy to do a follow-up if you want.
Hi. There's someone in the front row. Hi.
Hello. I'm very interested in retinal after effects, and I want to understand from what you described earlier with the structure, architecture of the consciousness, if you think the brain is recreating moment of times and kind of like, like the after effect image, which, if you were seeing things real time, you wouldn't see those patterns and forms that you create in your performance. So I'm interested to see what kind of map you've been able to recreate in exploration, if that makes sense.
A map?
What if you've been able to kind of identify some kind of map for the state of consciousness that you can describe to people in an easy way?
I would be so curious to do a neuroscience study on that particular effect, because it really is, it's a fascinating, I've read it as a bridge between two forms of perception, but I haven't scrutinized it through the scientific lens yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
But you've given me a great idea. Thank you.
The next project came from the room.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
There was, hi. Just over.
I had the last question that was asked. I would just love for you to expand upon that, because you showed those beautiful tapestries at the beginning, and I've been thinking a lot about how over time throughout art, we've become much more focused on the self. So those beautiful tapestries, or were they like wall etchings? it's all of these kind of natural symbols, right? And you even think about how ancient civilizations used different symbols in their language as well. Like Berbers, their language was made out of these different kind of natural symbols. And over time, we've become more focused on like portraiture and the self. And I think it's really interesting now that you're using yourself and your body to express your art and to explore these topics. So I'm curious, you know, you're talking about this idea of being kind of pulled away from that mother and that kind of divine source. Is there a point in history that you think where that like really kind of shifted? You think maybe it was around like, was that, you know, due to scientific reasons, scientific revolution, like the heliocentric kind of theory of like all the concepts of the world changing? I'm just curious, like if you think that was really due to science, because you did mention theology and all of those kind of concepts. And if so, now that we're able to prove a lot of these theories we're getting closer to with science, how do you think that changes how we understand and explore these kind of topics?
Yeah, wonderful question. Thank you. I think it predates science. That's my sense anyway. I mean, there's a lot that we call prehistory that is actually, you know, the history of the original Earth religion, you know. So there's obviously archaeological evidence that we're able to look at. Like, you know, one of the very intriguing findings is that point at which swords and weapons and blades start to be produced. And I think there is a sense that particularly may be the historic indicator of this move away from maybe a more matriarchal model. I want to say maybe though that the matriarchal model was likely to be an inclusive matriarchal model, maybe not replicating, you know, the logic of what we're seeing with the more kind of divisive. I mean, not to place this whole mantle of, you know, a pre kind of historical you know, women-run utopia, but I think there was a different modality of governance that was likely to be based more on a communalism and less on this sort of like warring and division over resources, in a sense. So that's one thing. And then there was something else that you said that was so interesting. It'll come back to me. I'll address it in a minute. Yeah, thank you so much.
And there's one last question right there. Right, yes, hi.
Thank you for this talk. It's been really extraordinary. I can feel like on a cellular level, my cells waking up with the excitement of learning. I'm curious about your experience of language at this point with the work that you've been doing. I do a lot of work with language with people, and I have this experience from time to time that there isn't sufficient enough language to use to create, give people access to something. And so I'm curious.
Oh my gosh, thank you. This question is very, very close to my heart. I feel like maybe the first half of my career up to this moment has been focused very much on fashioning a vernacular of the metaphysical that wouldn't create a kind of, you know, knee-jerk trauma-triggering reaction, you know, because I think unfortunately, so much of what has the scaffolding that has developed around spirituality and spiritual practice has been, you know, used, unfortunately, for, you know, domination rather than co-creation. So that's really interesting. So yes, I think science, particularly because it is the arbiter of truth of our age, who knows how long that will be the case. I feel like that's changing by the day, or at least the capacity of science is expanding and will expand as we also expand upon the sacred imagination, which is totally the work that I'm planning on doing in the jungle, because I think, it's really the mind, and this is where the architecture of consciousness comes in to kind of wrap it all together, but like, the mind and the human being, like the tree of life, and I'll use the Kabbalistic language, but the tree of life, yes, it's rooted in the earth, but it's also anchored to the divine realm, right? And so like that is how the human being finds its full structure, and it's that tension that is created between these 2 points of orientation that allow for the consciousness to fully flourish. And within that cosmological ideal, I think there is this sense that at some point, the mind discovers that she is not in a subordinate position to matter, that instead she is the master of it. And so this is so precious, because this, I think, is when we think of mind, the mind is so precious and so sacred. There's this practice that I call mentalism, that really reduces the mind to this like philosophically materialist kind of mechanism. But the mind itself will find her full dignity when her and the awareness of the human organism is anchored to that divine realm. And then the mind can really flourish and expand and understand that, actually everything is taking place within her. She is not a slave to the world of matter or somehow entrapped within it. And this is very exciting because this is where we're going with science, with spirituality, with art, with poetry, like you name it, like this is, we're hungry for this. I think we're kind of at this point of exhaustion where that old fare of mentalism will no longer satisfy the full appetite of the human being. And so it's a very exciting time to allow ourselves to experience the fullness of that desire. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's give one more big round of applause for Leah, the artist. Send her off to the jungles of Mexico. And our moderator, Ira Silverberg. And all of you, thank you for coming and making this possible. We'll be back November 19th. Please take the card with you and go grab a drink and, have a good time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, so much for coming online. Your presence is appreciated and felt. So if you want to learn more about Leah Chavez, you can go online to her Instagram and website. Thank you again for joining.